The Trial of Yakone was the craziest thing that ever happened in Republic City, and it shocked the entire world. In fact, it was this trial that led to the creation of the camera so that the whole world could follow the results and see what the fate of Yakone would be. And for over a decade, we all watched the same flashback of Yakone's trial play out in the Legend of Korra and assumed that we had the full picture. Well, a brand new official Republic City history book just dropped, and it casually reveals that the single most important person in the entire Yakone story was sitting at home that day, and historians are still asking why. So hit that subscribe button and let's get into it. So a brand new canon book is just released for Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, and in it, it has photos of Republic City and the biggest moments in Republic City history. And we get a full 2-page spread on the Trial of Yakone, which the book calls the Trial of the Century. This already tells you just how big this case was in the Avatar world. We always sort of knew the broad strokes from Korra's first season, and we got those beautiful sepia flashbacks where Aang and Sokka and Toph are sitting together in the courtroom, and Yakone gets sentenced. He bloodbends the entire room into paralysis, and Aang chases him down across the city and takes his bending away with energy bending. It's iconic and it's gorgeous. But by going with what this new book reveals, it's also missing some pretty significant context that completely changes how the whole event reads in canon. So the first thing the book changes is how we think about Yakone. In the Korra flashbacks, the trial gets framed in a way that makes Yakone feel almost like a lone wolf, this terrifying solo figure who somehow took over the entire criminal underworld through sheer bloodbending and intimidation. The new book, however, paints a completely different picture, and one that's way more complete. It tells us in the 3rd decade after the 100-Year War ended, there was not a soul in Republic City who did not fear the name Yakone, and that he had built an actual empire of crime through bloodbending. His rise was surrounded by mysterious circumstances and dark rumors, with rival crime bosses getting toppled one by one until he became, in the book's exact words, nearly untouchable. The world was enraptured by the mystery of how this man could rise from nothing to become a criminal warlord feared by the entire world, not just Republic City. Some people thought he was blessed by the spirits to take this role, and some people thought he was cursed by the spirits. And then the book gives us a photograph from the museum collection captioned "Yakone's gang at the height of their power," and you can clearly see 4 men standing in a formal portrait. Yakone had a whole organization around him, a proper criminal hierarchy with lieutenants and forces, all of them benefiting from having a bloodbender at the top who could remove any rival without leaving a single mark on their body. What eventually brought Yakone in and brought him to the attention of the law was the slow accumulation of victims and witnesses. The book describes a years-long game of cat, fox and mouse between Yakone and the police, where authorities simply could not pin a charge on him, similar to Al Capone in the real world, until finally enough people came forward at once, and the case became impossible to bury. When the arrest happened, the book says it threw the entire city into a frenzy. There were riots, there were crowds building up in the marketplaces, everyone was going crazy. And here's where the book gives us an incredible piece of in-world history. It tells us that the days leading up to the trial were one of the very first times in the entire Avatar world that newspapers dispatched photographers into the streets specifically to capture the movements of key figures so that ordinary people could see them with their own eyes. The whole city was reading the same front page every single morning, and the book directly calls the Trial of Yakone the birth of what became known as the first media circus. Just like the real world, this was the first ever media frenzy, media circus that enraptured the entire Republic City. And honestly, I'm pretty sure people from the Fire Nation, people from the Earth Kingdom, and even some from the Northern Water Tribe were probably watching this trial with great interest. This is wild context to add to a courtroom scene that we always took for granted as a quiet, contained legal proceeding. Of course, with the bloodbending, we knew it went crazy towards the end, but most people thought it was just a boring, bureaucratic courtroom scene like any other. But actually no, this was one of the biggest events in Republic City history. During the trial, Republic City was watching Yakone in a way that a city watches a sports game. They were hanging on every photograph, every leaked detail from the trial, every name that appeared in the print. By the time Aang and Sokka and even Toph rolled up to the city hall the morning of the trial, the entire city was already at fever pitch. Things were about to explode. And then the trial itself, which we saw in Korra. Yakone is convicted, sentenced to life in prison, and the moment that gavel comes down, he bloodbends every single person in the courtroom into paralysis and tries to escape through the chaos. The new book confirms all of this and then adds some specifics that change the actual scale of what happened that day. It says Yakone publicly revealed his psychic bloodbending abilities at the trial, the same abilities that had enabled his entire rise, and that Aang took them away with energy bending in the middle of 13th Avenue. That is a real named geographic location that the book is dropping for the very first time, and that is located in Republic City. It's right in the center. The fight escaped the courthouse and spilled out onto a downtown street in broad daylight, with photographers and reporters and even ordinary citizens watching the whole thing happen in real time. time. The book describes the moment as a rare public display of Aang's raw power and calls it terrifying, thrilling, and something that shocked the citizens of Republic City. They knew he was a powerful man, but they had never seen it with their own eyes. Now they had. Some people were so shocked with the Avatar's raw display of power that they went into hiding for months. And the book goes on to give us more details about this, saying half of Republic City stood on the sidewalks of 13th Avenue and watched their Avatar use a technique that most of them had never even heard of on a man who had just psychically bloodbent an entire courtroom into submission. While photographers captured every second of it, that is a much bigger event than relatively quiet sentence that we got in the Korra flashbacks. The show focuses on the personal stakes between Aang, his exhaustion afterwards, and obviously the bloodbending, but the historical reality according to this book is that Aang and Yakone had a full public bending duel on a named downtown street, and that fight effectively became the moment that the modern Republic City public truly witnessed energy bending for the first time ever. That's when they knew the Avatar was on their side. Like, let's be real, most ordinary people in Republic City had never seen the Avatar do anything beyond standard elemental bending. Energy bending was effectively a lost art that almost nobody outside of Aang's inner circle even knew existed, and he used it on a public street in front of cameras and thousands of people watching on the sidewalks. This is just such a good detail, and I'm so glad this book has finally revealed this to us. This is so good. And another thing that is also mentioned in the book on the next page, which isn't directly related to the trial, but also feeds into the whole spectacle of Aang and Toph and the whole Team Avatar fighting Yakone in a trial. The whole spectacle of that was that Aang and Katara's love story actually became legendary across the world, and it became one of the most followed dramas, let's just say, in the world. People were enamored because Aang was the last airbender and Katara was the last waterbender of the Southern Water Tribe, so it became a famous love story in every nation. And because of that, people wanted to see what was happening with Aang's trial against Yakone. And you gotta remember, Tenzin was like 9 years old when the trial happened, so people were scared because if Tenzin died, Aang would again be the last airbender and the lineage of airbenders may die forever. So this was a huge moment for the world. And then we get to a detail that I genuinely cannot stop thinking about. There is a famous photograph reproduced in the book showing Aang, Sokka and Toph riding together in a carriage on the morning of the trial on their way to City Hall. In the foreground of the photo, by complete accident, a reporter's hand got caught in the shot holding up a notepad. And on that notepad, you can clearly read 4 names written down. The names of Aang, Sokka, Toph, and then circled the name of Katara. The book then states very directly that historians have noted the significance of this because Katara was notably absent from the trial. And then the book drops the single line that recontextualizes everything we thought we understood about that day. It says Katara was absent despite being known for successfully fighting to instantiate the international ban on bloodbending in the world. Journalists from that time and historians later were shocked. Katara was the one who made the law, so why wasn't she there for the Trial of Yakone? She had spent years of her adult life lobbying every nation, every council, every leader to make the practice illegal across the entire world. And on the day of the trial, the day her work finally produced a result, she was not in the courtroom. So a reporter circled her name, already asking the question, and the book deliberately leaves that question completely unanswered. We don't know exactly why she wasn't there, but maybe Aang didn't believe it was safe enough for her to be there, so he told her to stay home. That is possible, but that leaves us a question that hopefully will be answered in the comics coming very soon. Hey, maybe Katara just couldn't even handle seeing bloodbending ever again after what Hama did to her, and after how bloodbending managed to somehow escape and be learnt by Yakone later on. Did he learn it independently, or did Katara accidentally, maybe inadvertently, teach Yakone through some way that she didn't realize? That is a question that I'm certainly gonna look into on this channel. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, and if you made it this far, drop a subscribe, drop a like, and drop in the comments down below. Thank Mrs. Katara. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.